Okay, thank you. Good day, good morning, everyone. I spoke yesterday and today as well. Thank you so much for having me here. I just wanted to mention that my colleague, Dr. Pedro Mazzoleni from the University of Free State, he is part of the work that I'm presenting today. He was supposed to also be part of the conference, but he couldn't be because of some other commitments, couldn't be here. All the work that I'm going to be talking about today is the work that two of us are working on. So I just wanted to highlight that before we go on. So yes, the topic that I'm going to talk about today, I think it's very important for the South African higher education system, for the universities, and there's some important critical questions we need to ask. Because the lists that Department of Higher Education and Training puts out every year to tell the universities these are the accredited journals, these are the indexes, and these are the accredited journals where South African academics and researchers or anybody affiliated with South African universities should be publishing because it's linked to, there is a monetary link, and I'll talk about it in detail. And I think it's very important to unpack the lists and see what the lists are telling us. Very briefly, a few months ago, a number of authors published a book. It's an open access book. You will have access to these slides, and the links will be there. I strongly suggest everyone who hasn't seen this book to check it out. It is open access. It's published by the South African publisher, African Minds. The book looks at the academic publishing and global science, and specifically looks at Ghana. And it's still very relevant for South Africa because they unpack not only the situation and the issues and complexities that academics in universities in Ghana are facing when it comes to what they term bibliometric coloniality, but also they go further and look at what is happening across the African continent, and South Africa as the leading knowledge producer on the continent is highly present in that book, and they talk about South Africa quite a lot. When they talk about bibliometric coloniality, they refer to the domination of the big bibliometric indexes that are based in the global north, which dominate the space globally, which basically shape kind of the global knowledge space. And what they highlight in the book and in the defining of the term bibliometric coloniality, they highlight how this is having negative impact on the African continent, on African institutions, African academics, and also on many African journals across the continent, long established African journals, which are not part of these indexes, and in many ways end up being invisible on the global stage. In the book, they speak about a small handful of these companies, and they take on the debate which we have seen develop and expand in South Africa quite a lot since 2015 on the coloniality of knowledge and domination of the Eurocentric or Euro-American-centric knowledge and perspectives and worldviews in knowledge and education and higher education. I've done a lot of work looking at how the Eurocentric epistemic hegemony still basically dominates at South African universities within the curriculum, and also yesterday I spoke about how that is also visible in research, especially when it comes to international research collaboration and with whom South African universities are collaborating. So they've taken this a bit further to specifically look at bibliometrics and to unpack this and to term this bibliometric coloniality. Dr. Pedro Mazzoleni and I have written a short piece on what I'm talking about today. This was published recently in University World News. I encourage everybody to check that out as well. And we're currently working on a larger paper that will unpack this in more detail. And some of the data that I'm going to show you in a moment will be part of that paper. Bibliometric coloniality in South Africa is really what I want to talk about, and to unpack, the systemic and structural issues and challenges that South African universities are facing, and also to see where is this coming from. Who is the main protagonist when we, if you have to assign blame, who do we blame? Because I think it's really important to start talking about this. And Dr. Mazzoleni and I, we strongly argue that it is the Department of Higher Education and Training that is at fault here. When we talk about transformation or the lack of transformation in South African higher education, there's a lot that we can blame the universities for. There's a lot that we can blame the academics for. There's a lot we can blame the leadership for, but not for this. Because it is the Department of Higher Education and Training that every year puts out the lists and says to the universities and academics, this is, if you want to get research subsidies, this is where you have to publish. What the lists contain, currently the lists contain, the list from the Department of Higher Education Training is dominated by the Scopus and Web of Science indexes. And there's also a list from Norway, there's also a list from the United Kingdom, and there's also a list that is based or index that is based in Sweden. What you can see there are all countries that are based in the global north, and Scopus and Web of Science are international corporates, again, based largely in the global north, with maybe offices here and there elsewhere in the world. Apart from these lists that are based in the global north, there are also two South Africa specific lists, much shorter than the others, the CLO SA and the Department of Higher Education Training's own list. What is important to highlight is that there are no other lists. There is no African list of journals. There is no a list of Chinese journals. There is no list of any other, from any other parts of the global south that is part of the DHET list of accredited journals. What is important also to highlight is that when it comes to the research output in South Africa, about 80% is published in the journals that are part of the DHET list. Out of that scholarly output that is published in academic journals, 74% in 2017 was published either in journals that are indexed by Scopus or Web of Science. If, for example, I am affiliated with a South African university, if I publish in a journal in Kenya, in Nigeria, in somewhere in China, and those journals are not part of any of the indexes that are given to us by Department of Higher Education Training, the university will not get any subsidies, and I will not get any subsidies. And you can see how the lists are telling us basically where we can publish or cannot publish. Of course, the lists are not preventing us from publishing outside of the lists, but there's a huge incentive for us to just look at the lists when we're deciding where to publish. So we argue that this way, by asking South African academics and researchers to publish only in South African journals, and that's a very small choice of journals, or journals that are largely based in the global north, Department of Higher Education Training is maintaining bibliometric coloniality, and they are the main systemic and structural reason for this going on up until today. I'm not going to read any of this stuff. I'm just going to highlight that the Department of Higher Education and Training this way is devaluing the credibility and visibility of African scholarly journals, as well as many thousands of journals that are based in the global south. And this way, again, reinforcing academic coloniality and epistemic exclusion. What I would like to now do is, so yes, we can make a lot of arguments about this. We can write about stuff. We can quote people. We can We can make philosophical arguments why this is wrong. But what Dr. Mussolini and I have then decided to do is to unpack the lists, to see what is in the lists, which countries or the journal, where are the journals based that are indexed by Web of Science, that are indexed by Scopus, that are indexed by the Norwegian, UK, and the Swedish indexes. Currently, we have done the analysis for the Web of Science and for the Norwegian lists, and I'm going to share the data with you for those two. We are busy with others. We still, a lot of it is still work in progress. If you look at the bottom right on the screen, we looked at all the journals that are indexed by the Web of Science, and you can see there that out of all the thousands of journals that are indexed by Web of Science, 94% are based in the global north. Only 6% are based in the global south. The majority of the world, by the way, is the global south. Yet, when you look at this, you see that the majority of the world is, I would say, deliberately ignored by Web of Science. So yesterday, when we spoke about the scientific principles, when we spoke about the importance of the scientific community, being in control of publishing, of knowledge, of open access, all the different things, we have to be also careful and ask questions. Who is this scientific community we're talking about? Who will again then be tomorrow in control if we, rescue knowledge from the corporate publishers, from the big indexes that we don't trust, and we shouldn't trust them, because things are skewed significantly, and we don't see a lot of people, our colleagues, specifically from the global north, questioning this, actually visualizing who is part of the index, the same picture you get when you look at Scopus, the same picture I'll show you, you get when you, even worse, when you look at others. So basically, the realities of the world are not the same as what we get when we look at indexes such as Web of Science. If you look at the top left, you can see which countries dominate the Web of Science index. I'm not sure why you cannot see the percentage of the United States. It's about 36%. It's the United States, it's England, the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland. There is no Africa. I mean, Africa is there in the rest of the world. So you can see the top 10, and then you can see the rest of the world. The rest of the world includes basically the rest, 200 plus countries. You can see when we speak about Eurocentric or Euro-American centric epistemic and research hegemony in the world, for me, this is it. This is the visual that illustrates it. I'll just
Sorry,
go
Dr.
and
Savo.
Yes.
Can I ask you to kindly round up? And we're also experiencing sound issues.
Okay, I'm not sure why would that be happening. So I have just a few more slides. You can see when you do select comparisons, and I'm not going to go into too much detail there. I just want to highlight that you can group countries, and you can group different countries together as well. You can see the BRICS, which again represent a lot of the world being hardly represented at all. I just want you to look at the African continent and the journals from the African continent that are part of the Web of Science Index. There are only 52 journals from the African continent. 41 of them are from South Africa. So if South African academics want to collaborate with colleagues on the African continent, they have to convince them to either publish in South Africa or to publish in the global north, because it is not going to count in South Africa when it comes to the research subsidies if we publish with colleagues in Uganda, or let's say Kenya, or Kenya, Ghana, or countries that are not there at all. What is also very important to highlight is that there are more journals about Africa that are based in and controlled by the academics in Europe and the United States than there are journals that are based in Africa that are indexed by Web of Science. The picture is even worse when it comes to the Norwegian list. I'm not even sure why this Norwegian list is still part of the DHET lists. There is no Africa. There's literally, there are no African journals on the Norwegian list. There are 9 journals about Africa that are based in the United States or Europe that are part of these lists. So I'm hoping I'm just giving you an idea of what we see as huge problems, and we need to talk about this. As research officers, as librarians, you often get to engage with academics on where to publish, and you most probably are going to tell academics, consult the lists, because we need funding, and the universities are put in a situation where they need the funding, and the researchers also need the funding that comes from research subsidies. I'm not quite sure. I cannot tell you what we need to do. If there's time for any engagement or discussion, I'm hoping that other people possibly have any ideas. The book on Ghana, the book titled Who Counts, has a few ideas. They speak about the need for an African index. They speak about the need for South Africa and other African countries to work together to develop an African index, instead of only just, I would say, blindly following whatever is being presented to us from the global north, because the tackling of bibliometric coloniality is not going to come from the outside. It has to come from the African continent, and I think it's past the time when we need to talk about this. And I'm really hoping, this is the last point I want to make, is that more people are going to critically look into this and ask important critical questions. And somehow we need to get university leaders, DVCs, VCs, to talk about this and to ask the Minister of Higher Education and Training, why is this still happening? We can go back to the lists for many, many years. This has always been the case, and nothing is changing. And there's no debate about the need to change this. So thank you very much for allowing us to share this with you, and I'm hoping that more people will start to ask these questions.
That was very insightful, and thank you very much for the research. Dr. Thanks, colleagues. I'm going to open the questions and comments only for Dr. Heleta's presentation, and then we'll take the question and answers for the rest of the presentation right at the end, because he has technical issues in terms of the sound. So are there any questions from the... Yes. Ms. Jeanette?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Savo. Where I'm sitting, I'm looking at it looks like deliberate isolation and exclusion, especially as Africa, to say you cannot share in, you are just giving a portion. I was looking at the output to say that the global south is only 6% of the 94% of the global north. So I like the fact that there are proposals on the table to say, why can't we have our own African indexes? That's a wonderful proposal that I think all of us need to embrace. Now my question is, has this proposal perhaps been maybe shared with the Association of African Universities, just to ponder the idea around? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this book came out a few months ago only, and we have read the book, and then we decided to build on it. Because they focus on Ghana, but they also talk about what the continent needs to do. We are now doing some additional work, part of which I've presented here, and so we're also going to build on their proposals to see what would be possible and how to start in South Africa, and what could be the role of universities, what could be the role of academics, and also how to engage, how to engage the government, and there are indexes. There is a small index. It's based in South Africa, but it's looking at the continent. And the big issue is that this small index is facing huge financial challenges to build itself, to expand itself on the continent. So, this conference, past 2 days that I've participated in, there's a lot of talk about the funding and the challenges related to funding. So I think there is a need, and I have to tell you, to be honest, Dr. Mzileni and I will not come up with solutions. We cannot alone, and we shouldn't alone come up with solutions. We're hoping to present the picture the way it is and ask more people, you and others, to engage, to participate, to offer ideas, because it's not going to happen overnight. And I think we then need to call onto the government to engage with the sector and to engage with other African countries and other higher education sectors and the African Union to seek the solutions. I think the solutions, the structural and systemic solutions, will first sit with the governments and then with the universities. And this is why I'm saying it is so important if we, us, you, other people, if we can get university leaders to understand the importance of this and work together. In South Africa, USAF is possibly a platform where this needs to be discussed, and ask the government, where are we going with this?
Savo, I think you raise a very important point for Stanlic to take further, and we certainly are more powerful as a collective. And I realized from the keynote address this morning, we need to be more collaborative in our approaches so we can get more powerful, we can present our voices and strategies for libraries to break the mold. I think there's a comment online, and then I would take the last question from the floor. There was a comment. Can I go online? I can't see the comment now, so maybe we'll take the question from the floor, please. I'd like to. Okay, here's the comment from Margaret. Bibliometrics rankings are not a level playing field for the haves and the have-nots. Dr. Savo, your presentation is powerful. Thank you. I will take one more question, and then we really have to close this session as we need to get on with the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please.
My name is Kunle Okbarinde from the Durban University of Technology, and thank you very much, Dr. Savo. I am an editor-in-chief of an academic journal, which is indexed in IBSS and DOAJ, and I find this quite relatable because a few years ago, I tried to get onto the Norwegian database, but I was told that they no longer index journals that is outside of Norway. And I was quite confused why we have that database here in South Africa if they only cater for Norwegian people. And the question I want to ask is this: where do you think the problem is from? Because if we look at it critically and we say this is exclusionary in a way, I find that also conflicting. Are we deliberately excluding ourselves, or we are succumbing to the exclusion from the global north? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think, and I have to be very quick, I think the answer to your question is, I think the problems are on both sides. The problems are, the fact is that that these large indexes are ignoring the majority of the world. So they are the problem, and there are systemic and structural, historical, contemporary reasons for that. And I think the other side of the problem is coming from South Africa. Why we're asking these questions now in 2023, inspired by what colleagues, have done in the case of Ghana. And, how come this has not been highlighted as a problem in Pretoria, in the Department of Higher Education and Training for many years now? And how come that, we have to start, shouting at conferences to get people to understand, that there is a problem. But I think, this has been happening in South African higher education for a very long time. We needed students in 2015 and 2016 to tell us that real transformation and decolonization should be important in South African higher education, because the universities just didn't really care about doing much, if anything. University leaders didn't care about doing much, if anything. So this reminds me of that, and I think we can see this as a problem. I think we now need to do whatever we can in our own spaces and settings to call for change, and then participate in building whatever we see as needed to build on the continent.
I thank you very much, Dr. Heleta, for your presentation and responding to the queries. We certainly need to look further into that. Without further ado, I do want to, we can give